All right. This week we're discussing chapter six, which is Why Have We Stopped? And this is the APAC and Americas session of the Staff Engineers Path Book Club. Uh, I have the first item here. So I thought this chapter was kind of interesting. It was a little less dense, I thought, than some of the other chapters, but there was still kind of a lot of different topics covered. So there are a lot of reasons given why a project might get stalled. And at GitLab, I've seen a few of these, but the two biggest ones were being blocked by another team, which kind of seems to come up when we have cross-team projects, and that sort of specifically comes up with misaligned priorities, whereas one team has their top priority is this project, and the other team is just kind of helping out. Um, and I've also seen this in community contributions where maybe there's a community contributor that's really passionate about this project they're working on, but then the team doesn't necessarily have the time to fully engage with it. Um, and then I've also seen, secondly, it wasn't necessarily one of the reasons that people get blocked, but in the lost or your lost section, there's the reason of you don't know how to get there. And so I think that kind of overlapped with what I've seen where we jump into something without necessarily having fully planned for it or understanding how big it is. And then it just continues to grow until we realize, like, oh, this is much bigger than we originally thought. And that ultimately leads to a reprioritization and possibly like postponement of the project entirely. So I'm curious what you've seen at GitLab and what kinds of roles you've seen the staff and beyond engineers play in the resolution of these types of situations.
I'll start. We have actually an interesting topic right now with one of our with a community contributor with a MR with probably close to 2,000 lines of code being changed. So it's a pretty big MR. Some of our Staff Plus engineers in Verify have just mentioned some concerns with this MR. It's already got one approval. And so what's been interesting with this is we've been working pretty closely with product, trying to understand if there's a way to sort of, maybe, we basically need to, I think, stop some of the MR, what the progress in the MR, but it's difficult because, we are trying to, solicit more contributions from the community. And so it seems like Staff Plus engineers have been sort of gently nudging the contributor, like, maybe consider performance concerns in this area. So it's an interesting situation for me as it relates to the book, because I think it is something that needs to be stopped. And I think in some of the Staff Plus engineers roles, I don't think we've taken as a direct approach as we could. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the community contributions can be very tricky. And we run a lot around, or we run across this a lot with in the merge request coach group, where there's like it's a lot, like it's easy to invite people to contribute, but then like there's sometimes where we want to say like, okay, this isn't going to work for us, or this isn't going the direction that we would like it to. So um, like working around those situations is definitely much more difficult.
Yeah, I see this more with like upstream container registry than GitLab. Um, but it can be challenging to have to like sort of direct community contributions because they have volunteered their time. So you kind of have to balance like they didn't get they may have not allotted in their minds more time to do it than they did. Like they might be in their head finished and not really prepared to do major changes to the work they've already done. but at the same time, there's definitely cases of some historical code in the registry that got merged without enough scrutiny. And you do have to live with that for such a long time because you have to support the if it is causing a detectable behavior, you have to like support that bad behavior for a long time.
Yeah, that's a really good point of, once you set that sort of example, you really have to stick with it. So it is a matter of being very careful on, what kind of example you're setting, especially at GitLab where everything is so transparent. So community member could easily say like, well, like this just got merged and I don't see how mine is different, and having to work around anything like that. Okay. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that general thread, or on where we've seen projects get stalled and staff engineers get involved at GitLab?
Yeah, I can use an example from our version of the container registry. When we were doing the migration plan, originally we had decided that we are going to have two separate instances of the registry that are configured differently, and then there would be a load balancer that was able to tell like where requests should go. And we got the feedback that you've put a lot on delivery's plate without their knowledge, basically without consulting them, and we had to redesign. We had to find another way to make it work, and Stan Hugh and Camille were able to work with us and like really find a way to do it all within like the registry deployment and keep it the same. So that kind of, that was more of a you're lost, don't know how to get there kind of situation.
That's a really good example. And I can just verbalize Tom's note here. On a positive note, I've worked with a contributor to an area that the team explicitly said they don't have time to work on. So it's nice to help out as an MR coach. And yeah, I think that's a really good point. That we do have like systems set up to try to help with this. All right, Cheryl, did you want to go with your next point?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question to the folks on the call. Has anyone worked on any projects or seen some ideas, that they wish they had more time to work on? Maybe some of these projects are the ones that end up as, you're lost. It could be some really, really interesting idea that you wish you had more time on, for example. I can just verbalize for Tong. He said not GitLab directly. I've tried to enhance bundler and got stuck.
Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of projects that have been on my mind that I've wanted to work on, but either haven't had the time, or they weren't prioritized high enough. And sometimes I made the time to work on them because I really wanted to. But I think as we've been reading through this book, especially having just gone through this section on working on large projects, I'm realizing that some of the things I wanted to work on were not ready. They weren't planned out enough, or I didn't have enough information to necessarily decide that these were necessary. It was just maybe something that I thought like seemed cool at the time. And so I think this book has been really helpful in kind of making me think a bit more about, or thinking a bit more objectively, I guess, about those types of things.
I think there's a lot of places in the registry where I've looked at, I'm like, oh, like I could definitely clean this up, this way and, make this a lot, make this code a lot more beautiful. But it's never, it's never as compelling as like fixing the problems that we have that are, resulting in behavior and all this kind of stuff. So like definitely just like the project aesthetics or the aesthetics of the code. I would love to completely re-implement the registry some days, but it just doesn't um it's really hard to find the time for that.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, for me, I've not been part of some of these initiatives, but I've seen a lot of great discussion around, having GitLab events, more event-driven architecture. So these are the kinds of things I see, that would be, amazing to have at GitLab, but I can imagine also just folks finding the time or, not being their top priority or their team's top priority can be hard to find time for these kinds of initiatives. So that's what came to mind for me, was reading through some of this chapter.
All right, I've got another point I can paste in here, actually. If I can get this in here. So I thought a lot of these suggestions of like how to handle these situations kind of fell into the category that we see as manager of one at GitLab. And the examples that I gave, like in the first area above about stalled projects, they were often just resolved by like a senior person on the team or maybe a manager, just kind of stepping in and getting things moving again. Especially when it came to like the cross team collaboration, it was just a matter of like someone had to go talk to the team and see what was going on. And that's kind of mentioned in the book. There's the quote that you're responsible for understanding why things are stopped and getting it started again. So, given that the manager of one is part of GitLab's efficiency value, like how would you, as a staff engineer or as any engineer really, not just implement the suggestions, but also help other engineers to feel empowered to kind of do the same and take steps to unblock things when they see them? Because there's definitely like moments of like, oh, I don't want to mess with that. That's not my responsibility, or I don't know if I have the authority to do that. But kind of like growing people to feel a bit more empowered in doing those things would be good. Some curious about general thoughts about that. And I know for me personally, like the main way is making it visible when you do something, like to unblock or help a project along. So like if you go and talk to a team and say like, hey, this is our top priority, what can we do for you to help move this along? Not just doing that kind of by yourself, but then making it visible to the rest of your team so that they realize that that's kind of an acceptable behavior, and sort of just playing that role model.
I think part of it is surfacing information. the book talked about like a team that didn't realize they needed load balancing. So kind of using your, experience that you've been here before to like make sure that maybe not that the boxes are being ticked, but they're there to be ticked, having that guidance.
And Tom's writing that this is interesting, and I do it to first unblock and then make sure to document what was done. All right, what other things from this chapter would people like to discuss about being blocked, being stalled, being lost?
Yeah, I guess I wonder how people handle surprises, because with a lot of the bigger projects I've worked on here is often the things that you think are going to be a big problem are not, and like stuff will come up at um, inopportune times, and it can just really feel it can feel like something that would have been hard, but a lot more manageable if you had known it first. So how have people been dealing with kind of these last minute but larger issues?
Yeah, I think the main thing with surprises is like surfacing them early. So like as soon as you identify it, um, like sharing that information with anyone involved, so that you kind of have like everyone that can help knows about it as soon as they possibly can. Um, and then from there, hopefully there's some collaboration involved in finding the right or most efficient path forward, rather than having like one person struggle on it for a week or two and then finally like asking for help, only to then find out that they could have maybe either done it faster or it was going to be blocked either way. Um, so I think just like sharing early is one of the more powerful ways to combat that.
Yeah, I would agree with what Steve said. Like in some of my teams, I've noticed probably more so in the last few months that there's just been more customer escalations. So these are often, they come up for a team, and for some teams it's meant to be a drop everything and help this customer, or else they risk churning. So especially when there's a specific bug we're trying to tackle, I think it really helps just to get more people involved, especially if it helps with getting to an answer quicker.
Okay. And I guess we got a couple minutes here, so I'll jump back. There's a question posed by Tong on the last item about how to help other people feel empowered to take on, or to feel empowered to unblock, stalled projects. And so Tong had mentioned that like documenting what had happened. And he asks, is documentation enough though, or do others need more guidance or permission to try? I think that's a very, I think it depends on the person a lot. Like some people will see that and say like, okay, I can do this now. But then there's other people, like depending on their confidence level and experience level, that might appreciate the nudge from someone, or like having the suggestion come personally rather than necessarily from a doc. But yeah, I think it's very case by case almost. I do think there's a factor of in order to make it less case by case, trying to build that sort of culture of like, if something's documented, it's okay to do this, or if someone is doing something, it's okay to do it. So that's another way to kind of try to push for that. But that's a much bigger and more difficult direction to push. All right. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to cover or talk about before we end the call? All right. Well, thanks for joining, and yeah, we'll see you next week.